Yep, sit back, relax, and get ready to enjoy another awesome video by Capt Frank Lanier. Please subscribe, like, and share with all your friends and all the people you hate too. So for today's find, we have, again, something I always harp on in a number of videos, the hidden fire extinguishers. Open the cabinet, and here we've got two fire extinguishers in here. If you're going to keep them in a cabinet, you need to have a placard on the outside saying fire extinguisher inside. But let's delve a little deeper. So we've got two of them in here. They're not mounted. They should be properly mounted. And we look at one of them, and it's been discharged. So this one needs to be replaced. So mount them, preferably mount them outside where you can easily view them or easily spot them in the galley or whatever. But at a minimum, have a placard in there for one of them. I would put one in here and then mount the other one outside, outside the galley here where you can easily spot it. So for today's find, we have, again, something I always harp on. So for today's find, we have life jackets. We have kapok life jackets. Kapok life jackets utilize the material from the kapok tree to provide flotation. Inside these jackets, the kapok material is in here, and it's inside of a plastic airtight bag, a plastic bag. If this bag fails and the kapok material gets wet, then this jacket will just drag you down to the bottom like an anchor around your neck. So part of the inspection process is you have to squeeze the bag to make sure it's airtight, to make sure the kapok doesn't get wet when you get inside the water. These things are so old, the recommendation is pretty much always just replace them with units that are the more modern material like foam, which is what these are here. So kapok life jackets, here we've got a throw cushion that's kapok. It needs to be replaced as well. So for today's find, we're looking at the battery bank on a mid-sized sailboat. This is an AGM battery, and you see these this residue, this stain over here, this around the vents is boil over. So what it means is that this battery has been overcharged, and its status or condition is questionable now. You can also see, if you look down here, it's hard to see in the phone here, but the battery is bulging on the sides, are bulging right there. You can see the bulge right there. So that means this battery has been overcharged, and it's probably going to be, at a minimum, needs to be tested, but it's probably in reality going to have to be replaced. So for today's find, inspecting a propane system on a stove on a sailboat, these are the things you want to see here. You want to see this sign here that says, open flame cooking appliances, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, do not use this stove to heat the cabin. That's what this sign is saying. And then you have your propane placard, right? This system is for use with only LPG and such. You have to have these two signs at or near the stove to be to comply with ABYC requirements and stuff. The one thing you don't have here is you should also have somewhere, and they're not here, instructions on how to operate the stove. You may know how to operate it, but the person that's with you or your crew members may not. So you should also have the instructions to how to operate the system posted at or near the stove in the galley. So for today's find, bilge pumps that aren't really doing as much as they should be doing. These pumps are not mounted. This one is actually not mounted as well. They put it inside the base for a previous pump. So needless to say, these pumps need to be mounted. And you got all kind of debris in the bilge, leaves and pine needles and stuff like that. All of that should be removed, because any of this stuff can, could hamper the ability of your bilge pumps to operate properly, clog them up. Finally, the wire runs need to be routed and secured properly so they're not flopping around and resting in the bilge water. So for today's find, we're looking at the aluminum engine bracket for a small mid-sized powerboat, and we've got the aluminum engine bracket as an enclosed unit. And you look inside here, you can see water inside. So water inside an aluminum outdrive bracket is probably the worst thing in the world as far as a corrosion standpoint. So the recommendation, of course, here is to remove the water and let these things air out a little bit. You know, open them up and let them air out and dry out. And also keep your gaskets clean to prevent water from getting in there. So for today's find, we have a bowsprit that shows elevated moisture is pegging the meter. And you can see here, there is a crack running right here where the bowsprit is bolted to the deck, the foredeck. And this crack right here is caused by, the bow pulpit flexing. And the reason that it is flexing is because the bowsprit is of cored construction. Moisture has entered the coring and it's caused it to probably delaminate and rot. And that has caused the bowsprit to lose its structural integrity, so that when you're anchored, it's going to start flexing, and that's what we have here. So for today's find, we're inspecting the on a fiberglass hardtop on a mid-sized powerboat. This is of cored construction. The first signs of problems would be the depressions here, where the mounting hardware for the hardtop bolts it or secures it to the welded support structure or frame. So this is an indication that the coring is failing. And if we put the meter on it here, we can see that it is pegged. So the hardtop not only has lost structural integrity, and the coring itself is saturated with water. So once we start sounding the hardtop, you can tell by the noise that it makes that the coring is very likely not only saturated, but also delaminating from the fiberglass skin of the hardtop, which the cracks all along the edge of the hardtop here also bear out. Okay, so today's find, we're looking at some flares. These are looking a little ragged. You can see where they're deteriorating here. And let's look at the year. Let's see. Oh yeah, April 1987. That's a good year. What is that? 36 years ago. You guys always correct me on my math. I'm not good on the fly with my math stuff. Anyway, 1987. These are definitely in need of replacement. There's nothing wrong with keeping flares as spares, but if they've expired. But the problem is, don't be surprised if you use these as spares. Don't be surprised if you try to use them and they don't work, or the chemical in there deteriorates, so they'll start burning for less than the optimal length of time, or they might not even work. Okay, for today's find, we're looking at the toilet on a mid-sized powerboat, and this is the macerator. The toilet has a integral holding tank, so you've got a macerator here that you can either dump the effluent from the holding tank overboard, either by sucking it out of a fitting on the deck, depending on how you have this wide valve, or you can use the macerator to pump it overboard here. And the problem with this installation is the macerator is not mounted, so the macerator needs to be mounted. The other thing is the use of wire nuts here. Wire nuts are not recommended for use on board because they'll vibrate off and then leave an exposed, often energized conductor. So mount the macerator and replace these wire nuts with marine grade connectors. So for today's find, we're looking at the generator installed on a mid-sized trawler. You can see the generator is installed in a soundproof enclosure, and it has this fire port right here. The engine space also has a fixed fire extinguishing system. However, if the generator is installed in a enclosed cabinet and it has that fire port there, you should also have a portable clean agent fire extinguisher that can be discharged into the enclosure surrounding the generator. The reason for this is that if you notice the fire or smoke coming from the generator enclosure, you could use this portable extinguisher to rapidly extinguish it, rather than having to wait for the fixed extinguisher to go off. So for today's find, we're aboard a mid-sized powerboat, and if you look inside the cabinet here, we're looking at the hull. You can see these cracks along here. These are actually indications that the hull is flexing or oil canning. That's what these longitudinal cracks are right here. So this means that there's a weakness in the hull. that we need to take a look at a little more to find out what's going on and how to correct it. So for today's find, we're not looking at this life raft. We're going to be looking at the fire extinguishers that are shoehorned in there beside it. In addition to the problems, of course, being that the fire extinguishers are not mounted, they're not properly displayed here. This other one here as well. But what we're going to point out today is an easy way to determine if this fire extinguisher is a recalled unit. Kitty had a number of fire extinguishers back a few years ago that were recalled due to failures with them. One of the easiest ways to determine if this unit is a recall is to take a look at the pull pin. The pull pin on this unit has a vertical orientation, which is one of the indicators that it is a recalled unit. Another quick indication is that the handle is plastic. Leaks and stains are your boat's way of telling you something's going on. We're looking at an engine mount here, and there's a lot of rust, running rust on it. And the first thing you should ask yourself is why? Why is there rust on here? Well, we look up right above it, and there's the joint for the engine manifold to exhaust elbow. And what's happening is there's a leak at the gasket here, and it's dripping salt water down onto the engine mount, which is what's causing the rust on the engine mount. So for today's find, we have another example of life jackets stored in their original shipping bags. As we've mentioned previously, life jackets have to be removed from their shipping bags to be considered readily accessible by the Coast Guard if they board you. Now, this is not to be confused with the storage bags as we see right here. This is perfectly fine. They're inside a storage bag that you can open up and stuff. Storage in there is perfectly fine. You just can't store them in the shipping bags. So for today's find, we have the use of heater hose on a through hole fitting a seacock below the waterline. This is definitely not what this hose is designed to be used for. Any fitting below the waterline, particularly, you want to use a marine grade hose that is suitable for use below the waterline, and it definitely is not heater hose. So for today's find, we are looking at davits, the mounts for a davit on a large catamaran. And you can see the mounting hardware here. We have running rust, and this running rust is an indication that something's going on. It needs to be, the hardware needs to be pulled and inspected. Running rust, leaks and stains. This is your boat's way of telling you that something's going on, and it needs to be inspected. So here's a good example of some of the weird things you sometimes find on boats. Here we've got a corrosion on the propeller here, and it is each blade of the propeller has corrosion, and it has it in the same exact area. What's causing it? Is it galvanic corrosion, electrolysis, alien abductions? We don't know, but we got to look into it and see if we can figure out why. So for today's find, here is a good example of corrosion on the drip tray for a generator. As you can see, there is a lot of corrosion on this thing, and this tray is badly in need of replacement. Once you see rust and stuff on these trays, it could be a generator tray, it could be an air conditioner drip tray. Once it starts, it's just not going to get any better. It's just going to progressively get worse. So you should address corrosion as soon as you spot it. So for today's find, we're looking at the lower unit, the skeg of an outboard engine, and you can see that this one is bent. And it's also got a tiny piece missing off the end of it. But you can look over here and you can see that this is what it should look like. So what's happened is the owner has he's touched bottom, ran into some sand or mud or something, and that's what's caused the skeg to bend over, as well as the finish loss or paint loss on it.